Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone joining from all over the world, depending on which time zone you're in. My name is Ann Herod. I'm the Executive Director of PHAP, that's short for the International Association of Professionals in Humanitarian Assistance and Protection. It's my pleasure to be the first to welcome you to this webinar on inclusive COVID-19 responses of cities in the Americas, organized with UNHCR and the Mayor's Migration Council. This is the second webinar that PHAP is organizing together with UNHCR on the roles of different actors for implementing the Global Compact on Refugees. Before handing over to my co-hosts, Vittoria Zanuso, the Executive Director of the Mayor's Migration Council, and Gillian Triggs, UNHCR Assistant High Commissioner for Protection, I would just like to briefly go over the technical and accessibility aspects of the webinar platform. If you encounter any technical problems with the platform, please do use one of our video or audio live streaming backup options. These are powered through YouTube, and you can see the links there on your screen. My colleague Jane is monitoring these channels and will repost any questions or comments here in the main room. To connect to the backup live stream options, just follow the links that you see now on your screen. Jane will also post these links in the chat as needed. We're happy to be able to offer international sign language interpretation for this event. To always view the interpreter's video, click on the 3 dots symbol in their video screen and choose Pin Video. And please note that as the interpretation will shift between 2 sign language interpreters, you will need to change the video that you're pinning during the course of the event. We also have Spanish, Portuguese, and English interpretation available. For Spanish and Portuguese, click on the interpretation symbol and select your language. You can leave that throughout the event. To hear the English interpretation while Spanish or Portuguese is being spoken, select English under the interpretation symbol, but when English is spoken, select off. We're also happy to be able to offer closed captioning for this event. To enable, click on CC Closed Captions and then Show Subtitle to enable the captions. To see more than a single line of the captions, click on View Full Transcript. Finally, if you have any questions for the speakers at any time during the session, submit them using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If you want to submit your question anonymously, just check the box in the lower left-hand corner of the question form. And if you are following the live stream, just post your question in the chat or via Twitter using the hashtag #InclusiveCities. So with that, we'll turn to today's event, and I'd like to hand over to Vittoria to introduce the substance of the session. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Ann Herod. I'm honored to moderate this session and co-host with UNHCR and PHAP partners, and very pleased to welcome this excellent panel of speakers today. We have Gabriela Quiroga, Secretary of Social Inclusion of Quito, Ecuador. We have Councillor Shamarker Dubo of Victoria, Canada. And we have Juliana Armende, Deputy Secretary of the Human Rights and Citizenship of Sao Paulo, Brazil. The speakers will share with us today what they're learning on the ground, what's working and what's not working, but most importantly, what they need from states and international community in order to succeed, in order to do their job better, faster, and at scale when it comes to inclusion. Today's session will consist of some opening remarks from myself and my co-host Gillian Triggs, UNHCR Assistant High Commissioner for Protection, followed by a rich dialogue with our city speakers and followed by an open Q&A. And as Ann Herod said, I encourage all of you to submit your questions at any time during the event. We will be capturing those and make sure that we address them to our speakers. The Mayor's Migration Council was created by mayors, for mayors, during the conference for the adoption of the Global Compact on Migration. And the purpose was really to promote better, bolder migration policy and practice at all levels of governance. Our leadership board of mayors spans from anywhere from Los Angeles and Milan to Amman and Sao Paulo and all in between. And when the crisis hit, our mayors really took it upon themselves and worked really around the clock to promote inclusive responses to the COVID pandemic. But what does inclusive COVID pandemic means in practice? We're a mayor-led organization, so let's hear directly from our mayors in this video. that they made for you and all of our international partners.
They've been risking their lives to care for patients, to deliver food, and do the essential jobs needed to save lives.
Some lack access to public services and financial aid because of their immigration status.
Many have limited information in their languages.
Others live in overcrowded households and in informal settlements with no water or sanitation.
And on top of this, misinformation is fueling fear and discrimination.
As mayor, it is our job to support all members of our community.
Cidadania e direitos humanos não tem limite, não tem fronteiras.
The current pandemic will not be the last crisis we face.
But by elevating a local leadership to inform national and international responses,
The Mayor's Migration Council can help make sure that no one is left behind.
As you can see, mayors are doing great work. They are unstoppable, but they're doing so in the face of shrinking municipal budgets, blurred political mandates, competing priorities, and misinformation spreading even faster than the virus does. So directly in line with the focus areas that we'll be using to structure today's dialogue, our mayors call on states and multilateral partners to support them by taking three important actions. The first one is to ensure access to services regardless of migration status, and that includes healthcare and economic relief. The second is to empower migrants and refugees to be part of the solution, including through the regularization of immigrant essential workers. And the third is to combat misinformation, racism, and xenophobia by building positive narratives and social cohesion. I'm now really pleased to welcome our co-host for this session, Ms. Gillian Triggs, Assistant High Commissioner for Protection at UNHCR, to say a few words. Gillian, over to you.
Thank you very much, Vittoria. It's a very great pleasure to be co-hosting with you. So much work has gone into this, and it's a very exciting event and wonderful panelists. So thank you very much. The key then for us is that we want to discuss the responses by mayors and cities throughout the Americas to the COVID-19 response. And this is important because mayors and local municipalities are on the front line of responses to the emergency, and your leadership and leadership of all of these groups is vital in ensuring the inclusion of those who need assistance in access to health, to employment, to education, and to national social safety nets. May I say that this WebEx is extremely well timed because this week the Secretary General issued a policy brief on COVID-19 in an urban world, in which he describes cities as hubs of energy, resilience, and innovation that are well placed to lead the response to the health crisis. So with that leadership from our Secretary General, I'm really delighted to just make a few remarks, if I may, before handing over to the panel. Well, to begin then, it might be a surprise to some that while we think of refugees and those displaced in their own country as living in camps, but in fact 61% of the refugee population throughout the world live in urban areas. And as we've come to know, sadly, it's in urban areas that we find 90% of COVID cases. COVID and its long-term economic and social impacts have been particularly hard on all vulnerable people. especially refugees and those who've been internally displaced within their own country. These people need practical and non-discriminatory access to adequate health care and to vital information as a minimum right. So when discussing the role of mayors and cities in the response to COVID-19, I would like to begin, if I may, with some guiding principles. In responding to the pandemic, we have a visionary agreement that's been agreed by most states in the international community, the Global Compact on Refugees of 2018. The compact and the pledges made last December to give practical effect to the compact rest on two key ideas: solidarity of nation states in responding to refugee protection, and an equitable sharing of the responsibility for refugees and displaced people. No one could have imagined that so soon after these ideas were agreed and pledges made to give effect to these ideas, they will be put to the test by COVID. Indeed, the compact has provided a blueprint or a pathway for a global response to the pandemic and has proved to have an enduring relevance for all global emergencies that, as one of the mayors in your video said, this is just the start. We can expect many more and we need to be prepared. Well, the compact, of course, calls on a city network or a network of city mayors to share good practices and innovative ideas. The mayors, along with city administrators and local authorities, have indeed been champions in ensuring protection is available to refugees in urban areas, for example, through the Mayors Migration Council. The Council has launched the Global Mayors Solidarity Campaign to ensure access to services, as just been pointed out, to empower refugees as part of the COVID response, and to combat the rising level of misinformation, xenophobia, and indeed racism. At the Global Refugee Pledging Forum last December, concrete pledges were made by the mayors of Bristol, Milan, Sao Paulo, Strasbourg, and Durban on access to jobs, measures to reinforce social cohesion, and to ensure that refugees and migrants have a voice at the table for city-level planning. For example, Bristol pledged to strengthen opportunities for refugees and displaced people who want to be entrepreneurs within the local business community and with civil society. Sao Paulo developed a wonderful Connect the Dots project that creates a bridge between farmers, cooks, and families in need of food. And of course, that includes refugee and displaced persons. So throughout the pandemic, mayors have been a key to ensuring access to services, to information, and to financial support for refugees and others in need of international protection. And they've done so very often with very few additional or available resources. And we do recognize, as the Secretary General does, that cities have a difficult time. They're not collecting the taxes that they once did, so that their efforts of inclusion are especially valued by us all. So at UNHCR, we applaud the commitment of mayors and cities in implementing the Secretary General's Sustainable Development Goals for 2013 to leave no one behind and to ensure that refugees and asylum seekers are integrated into the local community. So thank you very much, and I very much look forward to the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Gillian, and we really applaud UNHCR efforts and partnership in elevating cities' voices the way that you're doing now and you've been doing for the past years, and your agency has been really one of the first ones to do that. So we really applaud that, and we applaud the Secretary General brief, which we contributed to, and really recognize the need of protecting migrants and refugees regardless of status.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm now pleased to turn to our city speakers for their perspective on three different themes involving refugees in response, ensuring access to services, and countering xenophobia. I ask that the speakers keep their responses relatively brief, 2 to 3 minutes each, so we all have time to contribute. And after the 3 rounds of questions, we will open up for questions from the floor. Again, for those who have a question, please submit it via the Q&A function. So we'll start with the critical topic of involving refugees in response. Over the past few months, we've seen refugees and migrants on the front lines of the crisis, as essential workers and doing the jobs we all depend on, from picking and processing food, to caring for patients in emergency rooms, stocking shelves at grocery stores, and much more. But despite putting their lives and the lives of their family at risk, many have been excluded from the relief they need. The truth is that refugees and migrants are one of the most under-recognized assets of the crisis. They frequently bring specialized skills to the table, including expertise in medicine, nursing, engineering, and education. And they also bring unique perspectives that should be taken into consideration when planning and implementing new policies and exploring uncharted territories in the policy world. We all know that when a plan works for the most vulnerable, it really works for all. Some local and national governments are really catching up on this and removing obstacles in the way of letting refugees and migrants to participate in the response. But let's hear directly from some of them. So I would love to welcome Secretary Gabriela Quiroga from Quito, Ecuador. Secretary Quiroga, bienvenida. If we can pull the video. I have a question for you. Hello. Thank you for joining. What are the main challenges and opportunities of this health emergency in the city of Quito? And what steps could you take to enhance the participation of refugees and migrants in your COVID response?
Hola, muy buenos días con todos, con todas. Un gran abrazo desde Quito, Ecuador. Les hago extensivo desde el señor alcalde, que no ha podido estar en esta reunión, pero estoy en su representación, donde uno de sus temas primordiales ha sido para trabajar en la ciudad por movilidad humana, por las personas migrantes que han llegado a nuestra ciudad. Nosotros sabemos que en el Ecuador las personas en movilidad humana son un grupo de atención prioritaria. De hecho, dentro de nuestros 10 grupos de atención prioritaria como Secretaría de Inclusión Social tenemos a personas en movilidad humana y hemos estado trabajando acá en la garantía de sus derechos, porque reconocemos su aporte en los ámbitos culturales, sociales, económicos para el desarrollo del país. El municipio del Distrito Metropolitano de Quito, en cumplimiento con el marco normativo internacional y nacional, transversaliza el enfoque de movilidad humana en las políticas públicas, los planes de ordenamiento territorial y los programas de inclusión social, que se lo hacen y se lo realizan permanentemente. Ejecuta acciones para la promoción y garantía de los derechos a través de una institucionalidad propia para atender a las personas en movilidad humana, sobre todo a las personas en mayor pobreza y vulnerabilidad, como son adultos mayores, niños, niñas, adolescentes, personas con discapacidad, personas adultas mayores y mujeres. Cuenta con el Consejo de Protección de Derechos. Acá en la ciudad de Quito tenemos el Consejo de Protección de Derechos y las Juntas de Protección de Derechos, donde trabajamos por los 10 grupos de atención prioritaria y velamos porque se cumplan los derechos de todos estos grupos. Nosotros también trabajamos en un marco de igualdad, dignidad y la no criminalización, permitiendo una verdadera integración de todas las personas a la ciudadanía del Distrito Metropolitano de Quito. Uno de los desafíos que tenemos como municipio es trabajar en los procesos de integración con toda la población de movilidad humana y en particular se debe poner un énfasis en aquellas personas que son grupos de alta vulnerabilidad con la necesidad de protección internacional. En paralelo también trabajamos en programas que fomenten la no discriminación. Trabajamos permanentemente haciendo campañas contra la xenofobia y promoción de derechos para las personas de movilidad humana. En esta pandemia hemos notado que a nivel mundial hemos tenido que pasar por situaciones muy complejas y duras. Así es que nosotros acá como ciudad hemos implementado la alarma de emergencia donde se ha entregado kits a todas estas personas, no solamente a las personas residentes y nacionales, también a personas de movilidad humana, donde se ha entregado a la par la misma cantidad de kits. También se han abierto albergues donde las personas que estuvieron en la ciudad en condiciones difíciles y no pudieron mantenerse en ciertos espacios tuvieron la opción de ingresar a albergues donde estuvieron garantizados sus derechos, donde tuvieron triajes médicos, donde tuvieron sus comidas diarias, su alimentación y sobre todo estaban cubiertos en temas de salud, que es lo que nos preocupaba tanto. También hemos estado trabajando permanentemente en territorio con campañas educativas y de sensibilización para saber cuál es la problemática de estas personas que han llegado a nuestro país. No solamente hemos estado trabajando con kits alimenticios, también con kits de ayuda humanitaria para niños, con una asociación, una fundación internacional que nos ha brindado kits para que estos pequeños también puedan pasar la pandemia de la mejor manera. Así es que como Distrito Metropolitano de Quito hemos tenido varias acciones permanentemente y seguimos trabajando. Sabemos que lo más importante que podemos dejar a nuestra ciudad, el mejor legado, es la política pública. Que cuando nosotros no estemos en esta administración quede garantizado y quede plasmado y sobre todo se ejecute la política pública. Por eso es que estamos trabajando en el Plan Distrital de Movilidad Humana y las rutas de protección para que se garanticen sus derechos.
Thank you, Secretary Quiroga. I couldn't agree more on the need to create sustainability and just look beyond short-term response and really build back better for the future. Turning now to a very different context, I would like to invite Mr. Shamarke Dubo, City Councillor in Victoria, Canada. Welcome, Councillor Dubo. As a former refugee yourself, can you tell us about your decision to run for City Council and how you are seeing Victoria, other cities and international partners better involving newcomers directly in COVID response?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. And here at the West Coast in Canada is 6 a.m. in the morning. Actually 7 a.m. Grateful to join you today. I first want to thank UNHCR and the Migration Council, Mayor's Council, and the PHAP for inviting me to be part of this discussion. First, I want to give context of Canada in terms to understand what's happening on the ground. And you know, in March, when the COVID-19 hit and government were closing and the shutdown happened, few refugees were coming to Canada, and a lot of refugees were left at the precarious situations overseas. So already we had few cases that came to Canada, but in Canada, the way our immigration system works is three parts, where government assisted refugees, where the government through the UNHCR, they arrive, and through private sponsorship, which is very unique in terms to our country, how refugees approach and come to the country. This is a unique program where normal people and citizens are directly engaged on refugee issues, where residents in my constituents sponsor refugees, and families come together from all walks of life. Some are city staff, some are teachers, and then they fundraise, bring families, and already have that existing relationships with the families. And it's an opportunity where when the refugee arrives to my communities, and the community, the host community already know each other. So we had that before the COVID-19, where a lot of refugees came through the private sponsorship. And there was existing relationships where the community already had that. And you know, synagogues, churches, mosques, schools, and you would see middle schools fundraising to sponsor refugees. So we already had that in our community in terms of refugees. But then when the COVID-19 hit, already and we having that relationship played a key role in terms of refugees having access to things. So as you mentioned, Victoria, and refugees play a really essential role. They are the cleaners and all the essential works that really were the hidden force that really made our community and faction as it is when the COVID-19 hit. And it was interesting the way you opened, Victoria, when you talked about how a lot of refugees were essential, but what happened in Canada is that the COVID-19 really exposed how much we need immigration, especially for the farm. And you know, a lot of farmers were temporary foreign workers, and when the COVID-19 hit, and a lot of people didn't come, so we missed the opportunity to also help the farmers. So why is it important that I open my discussion the private sponsorship? Because it's really important to see what are settlement agencies, such as the in my local city. There are organizations that work with refugees, such as Intercultural Association of Greater Victoria, Victoria Immigrant Refugee Center. So all these organizations were building in terms of working with the local partnership and immigration. So the federal government actually funded a program called Local Immigration Partnership, where it's supposed to create inclusive, cohesive social cohesion. And now, recently, the federal judge has ruled. We had something called Safe Third Country Agreement, which was agreement between the US and Canada, where people that cross the official borders were returned. So now that wouldn't be the case for 6 months. So the federal judge gave to the government to really respond to that. So we will be seeing, we are anticipate more refugee claimants coming, especially the southern Quebec, which is not in British Columbia, even here. So that is the landscape in terms of when it comes to refugee. But at city level, what we were doing is that programs, we had transit free for refugees. When refugees arrive for the first year, they don't have to buy pass and things like that, so they can ride the transit. And when the COVID-19 hit, I'm actually on the Regional Transit Commission. I'm also Transit Commission. So we made transit for free, fare free for a few months when the COVID hit. So it really helped everyone, not only refugees, but every single person. And we had another initiative before the COVID-19 hit, something called Growing in the City, which is, the city was supporting urban food production on public and private spaces. So we were offering free food seedings distribution programs for food security. And you could see that refugee families benefiting from that in community garden, and that also builds relationship within the host community. And we know that a lot of refugees were farmers before they came. So offering free seeds and being able to encourage food security was important. We had reconciliation dialogues. You know, here there are indigenous people, and we have a long history. So I participated and led reconciliation between the newcomers and the indigenous communities. We have this year participatory budget. It's a little portion of the city budget, which is very democratic, where the public could vote which programs would go. But all that money this year will go to refugees and immigrants. So any program that will support initiatives and enhance and benefit refugees, that's where the money will go, but the public will decide which program. So there's a lot of excitement in my community, people creating programs that would enhance. We have a welcoming city strategy, and we are working closely Welcoming America, which has international standards. So to see what it will look like to create city that accepts and sense of belonging, but also creates job opportunities, and how could we tap on the skills and the resources that refugees bring, because when refugees come, they don't only bring bags, they bring experiences, they bring a lot of things. So as a city, it's actually economically and wise to really tap into that. And we supported a lot of businesses. There were a lot of Syrians in 2015, as you recall. The government of Canada really took initiative that we brought more than 40,000 Syrians to Canada. So some of them today are citizens, some of them today are local business owners, some of them are truck food owners. So when COVID-19 hit, a lot of organizations had the food distribution and grocery distribution. Schools were giving food. So we have a lot of programs, because the most important thing is already through the private sponsorship, we had normal people who were aware the refugee issue, because their neighbors are refugees, their friends, the groups they sponsored. So I think that is what makes us unique in Canada. And in my community, actually, city of Victoria, there were families that came twice to sponsor again. And I think I will leave it there. But I think when the COVID hit, there was already strong relationships that really helped our community, so that neighbors were checking on each other.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you for waking up at 6 a.m. To join us today and for sharing all of these practices. I really like two things about what you said. The first one is the existence of existing assets that were created to deal with other crises are now becoming useful with the COVID crisis. And we call that city resilience, when a city builds a strong fabric of assets that can be reused to bounce back when a new shock arises. So that's something that I think is very important. And then the second, you mentioned that COVID exposed how inclusive, how nations and cities, they need immigration. And there are some cities, and most importantly nations and states, that are now changing their policy to regularize essential workers that are playing a key role in the COVID response, whether that's healthcare or food, like it's happening in Italy right now. So I think there's a lot of connections, and my colleagues in the chat will also share some good examples that connect to your urban farming and other things you mentioned. But I would love to then move to the city of Sao Paulo, a city that is a great example of what you just described, because they created a council of immigrants well before the crisis hit. And now that the crisis is there, the council is really helping, involving migrants in the response and making sure that they receive the information they need. So I would love to welcome Ms. Armede, Deputy Secretary of the Human Rights and Citizenship Secretariat. And before doing that, I would like to involve all of the speakers, including myself, to speak a bit slower for the interpreters, because we're a global crowd and we need to speak a bit slower. So a bit of a reminder. Ms. Armede, the floor is yours.
Olá, Vitória, olhar para todos. Falar daqui de São Paulo, um bom dia. Agradecer em nome do prefeito Bruno Covas, da secretária Cláudia Carleto. Eles estão juntos agora fazendo um anúncio, um preparativo de anúncio do balanço de todas as ações sociais da cidade, o que inclui também migrantes e refugiados. Então, estou aqui representando, muito contente, feliz, grata pelo trabalho que o Acnur também vem desenvolvendo de apoio a todas as ações no âmbito da cidade de São Paulo. Mas, enfim, vamos atualizar vocês de como caminhou o que no início do ano e já em andamento no ano passado estava em construção na cidade de São Paulo, que é literalmente agora o mais novo plano municipal de políticas para os migrantes, né? A gente tem uma previsão para 11 de agosto desse plano ser lançado. Ele é um acúmulo de uma série de atividades que aconteceram em 2019, nas chamadas conferências dentro do município de São Paulo. Eram espaços com a participação plural do poder público, da sociedade civil, com migrantes e refugiados, e ali uma série de frentes envolvendo mais de 8 secretarias do município foram identificadas em ações que agora vão ser lançadas no plano. E é ótimo porque de alguma maneira isso vem a chamar a atenção e colocar na agenda do município, tanto para esse ano, com os desafios, como para o ano que vem, né, que a gente não vai acabar tão cedo com os desafios dessa pandemia, a gente vai colocar e manter na agenda no município da cidade de São Paulo uma série de ações transversais e que vão estar fortalecendo, sim, a participação dos imigrantes. No âmbito dessa pandemia, né, pensando no resultado que é do trabalho dos imigrantes dentro do Conselho Municipal, que temos aí com o plano municipal, a gente ainda assim, com o desafio de não poder se reunir presencialmente, a gente tem aqui na Secretaria Municipal uma coordenação que cuida da temática de trabalho decente e de migração e refúgio. Ela manteve ativo, por meio de reuniões virtuais, o contato com todos os membros do Conselho de Imigrantes, uma das razões que permitiu, portanto, a conclusão, né, o fechamento da elaboração desse plano, que também eu já agradeço mais uma vez. Contou com a participação da equipe do Acnur aqui em São Paulo, então a gente teve uma grande, né, várias mãos, várias pessoas trabalhando, e dentro dessa continuidade de reuniões virtuais, a gente conseguiu identificar, no diálogo com os imigrantes, algumas ações que permitiram, primeiro, mapear, né, organizações da sociedade civil que já são parceiras e que estavam, né, acho que todo mundo estava, com o desafio de compreender como trabalhar com a realidade social dentro de um espectro de pandemia. Então, houve esse mapeamento, porque isso levou ao fortalecimento do município no diálogo e, eventualmente, em ações concretas. Depois, mais para frente, a gente conversa sobre elas, mas um exemplo básico foi o acesso à alimentação. Né? Essa articulação de mapear as organizações permitiu ampliar a nossa rede de contato para chegar nos migrantes e refugiados. A gente também conseguiu desenvolver um diálogo entendendo o problema que os imigrantes enfrentavam para poder acessar uma série de documentos no âmbito brasileiro. Um exemplo é o nosso Cadastro Nacional de Pessoas, né? Um cadastro que é feito por um órgão federal, que passa por uma série de instâncias, incluindo a Polícia Federal, que é o órgão competente para os primeiros passos no acesso à documentação. E por conta da pandemia, não só informação, mas como também acesso a esses equipamentos públicos estava limitado. Então, compreender o problema para se poder dar uma solução foi um excelente trabalho de articulação, de escuta com os imigrantes. Isso gerou uma possibilidade, portanto, da gente auxiliar, entendendo como eles poderiam ter acesso aos documentos e, com isso, fazer o cadastro, porque no Brasil a gente conseguiu garantir minimamente, com muita articulação também de representantes do sistema de justiça, né, garantir o acesso ao auxílio emergencial de uma maneira universal, o que incluía uma série de pessoas nacionais brasileiros de toda a categoria de trabalho, mas também migrantes e refugiados. Houve também nesse processo um lançamento de uma campanha contra a xenofobia. Eu acho que a gente pode abordar um pouco mais, mais à frente como foi esse processo, mas dentro de um desafio nacional, histórico, brasileiro, que a gente vive, que é o racismo, eu acho que isso acabou aparecendo agora, nesse momento também no mundo, mais uma vez, como uma realidade que precisa ser permanentemente incluída na agenda da política pública. A campanha de combate à xenofobia, que envolve o racismo e todas as discriminações que existem no âmbito social, foi feita em diálogo com o Conselho e com os migrantes. Como eu comentei, dentro de um dos programas sociais da cidade, que se chama Cidade Solidária, houve a inclusão e uma articulação para que o imigrante pudesse acessar cestas básicas, né? Ou seja, a reunião, um pacote com alguns produtos que vão de alimentação à limpeza e higiene pessoal. Então, esse conteúdo todo, né, de diálogo permitiu a inclusão e informação e acesso real dos migrantes e refugiados a esse serviço. A gente, com certeza, acaba dentro desse processo do diálogo, né? E aí, para acabar, o que a gente tem assim de bons resultados dessa permanente cooperação entre o poder público e o Conselho de Imigrantes. A gente, sem dúvida nenhuma, aprende com a pandemia. A gente não tinha nada pronto, né? Por mais experiências que a gente possa no mundo ter se espelhado para poder entender o que fazer, ainda assim, acho que nos pega no sentido do desafio tanto individual, psicológico, como da construção da política pública, porque no final de tudo somos todos pessoas, né? Eu acho que eu estou aqui, vocês estão aí, a gente é gente. Então, assim, compreender como desenvolver uma política pública permanecendo com o diálogo entre todos gerou, sem dúvida nenhuma, para as outras secretarias. A gente teve outras iniciativas no âmbito das outras secretarias, também boas ações emergenciais nesse período da Covid. Então, assim, a experiência de ser plural, a experiência de você poder conversar, entender o que as pessoas estão precisando, que às vezes acaba sendo uma simples informação, ou às vezes algo muito mais profundo, como uma alimentação, um acesso à saúde, a compreensão como a gente aqui em São Paulo, no Brasil, tem um sistema único de saúde que atende a qualquer pessoa, sem nenhuma discriminação. E, às vezes esse é o mínimo recado que as pessoas precisam ter para poder ter uma proteção social. Então, é isso. Queria dizer, para finalizar, que o plano vem logo em breve na cidade de São Paulo, e que mesmo com a pandemia, a tecnologia nos ajudou bastante nessa articulação. E a gente tem a sorte de ter aqui na Secretaria e no município como um todo, uma equipe que é comprometida, que é engajada e que eu faço aqui questão de agradecer. É isso.
Thank you, Ms. Armede. Thank you, Mayor Covas, and all of the team that we work very closely with. And thank you for really striving to build social cohesion in an era of social distancing, which seems an impossible task, but nothing is really impossible for our mayors. So I would be remiss if we didn't bring back Gillian into the conversation here, as we know that supporting refugee leaders and refugee-led groups has been such a priority for the High Commissioner in recent years. So Gillian, why don't you share your reflection on what we heard so far?
Well, thank you very much, Vittoria, and I've very much enjoyed the discussion so far, and so many. It's so heartening for us all here at UNHCR to know that cities and leaders of rights organisations within cities are working so hard to find ways to include refugees and displaced people. So thank you. I wanted to say how important it is for us at UNHCR that we do include refugees meaningfully in participation of cities and planning. There's a term, nothing about us without us, and that is really our guiding principle. I think probably you're all aware that there's of a tendency, and we've done it too at UNHCR, to include refugees in panels, but perhaps not do a lot more than that. In other words, we've tried to give a voice, but we are now exploring ways in which we can much more meaningfully engage and to hear their voices in participatory ways of developing policy and in governance. So there are various initiatives that we've taken to work with refugee-led NGOs, refugee-led networks and groups. And one that again emerged from the Global Compact on Refugees is the Global Youth Advisory Council. And that's really brought together young people, articulate, educated, clear young people, willing to speak up, to work together from across the world. And I've met them. I met them last year at the major meeting of our party members, the executive committee members, welcoming global youth members in the advisory council, and they really do make a great contribution. And that now has led to the formal establishment last year of the Global Refugee-Led Network. We've also launched a refugee UN volunteer program, which is actually paid through UNHCR to get people, more and more volunteers, engaged in refugee-led organizations. We do have a long way to go. I'm not suggesting we're getting it right totally at the moment, but we are working with other humanitarian actors to bring the refugee voice to the policy-making table. And in fact, I noticed that whenever a refugee speaks, they command the audience. People listen to refugees because their experiences are unique to them. Every refugee, every displaced person has a story to tell, but also to bring so many richnesses and experiences to the communities in which they settle. I love to hear these stories about food programs, gardening programs, but also to remember that many refugees and displaced people have very considerable skills, and it's been very heartening in the COVID context to see so many people having their medical qualifications recognized and making a contribution to as health workers in hospitals and community centers. So, but we've also got some remarkable stories of refugees in refugee camps establishing radio programs as former journalists. And of course, we've seen them working in agriculture to lighten the load. I think the point is well made by Councillor Dubo that one of the rather perhaps silver linings to the COVID pandemic has been to demonstrate that in fact we do need the migration program for many of the jobs in our communities, and we hope that through labour mobility opportunities those jobs will also be available to refugees. So I think they're my main points. I think that the pandemic has challenged the world in many ways, but it's also shown just how effective we can be when we work at the local level through our municipalities, through our mayors, and through those kinds of local government programs. So thank you. Back to you, Vittoria.
Thank you, Gillian. Turning now to the second but equally critical topic of this consultation, it's access to services. From our experience, we see that city leaders don't build inclusive programs just because it's the right thing to do. Definitely, that's the primary entry point. But they do it also because it's the smart thing to do along this line, the lines of what the councillor was saying before. Because as we said before, when you make your plans work for the most vulnerable, then you make them really work for everyone else. So I would like to bring back Secretary Quiroga and ask to give us some concrete examples of ways in which the city of Quito has made sure that migrants and refugees could access key services. What challenges do you still foresee in this regard that other partners in the international sphere could help you feel?
Bueno, nosotros en la ciudad de Quito, no solamente justamente en la pandemia, sino mucho antes hemos venido trabajando para que los servicios que tenemos como ciudad, inclusive como país, sean amplios para todas las personas, sin discriminación. Así es que hemos trabajado, como les mencionaba, en el Plan Distrital de Movilidad Humana, donde las personas en estas condiciones puedan tener estos beneficios, puedan ingresar a los servicios básicos como son salud, educación, alimentación, proyectos que tengan para microemprendimientos, para grandes emprendimientos, que es tan importante. Recordemos que ellos no solamente salen de su país con sus maletas, ellos salen con todos sus sueños, su cultura, sus tradiciones, y eso es muy importante sobresalir. Acá en la ciudad de Quito hemos realizado ferias inclusivas donde ellos tienen la posibilidad de participar junto a otras personas de las mismas nacionalidades o de otras nacionalidades en sus emprendimientos, con artesanías, con alimentación, con platos típicos, etcétera, ¿no? Ahora también, justamente antes de la pandemia y en la pandemia, hemos estado trabajando con la Secretaría de Salud, donde se han realizado pruebas PCR para el tema del virus, del COVID-19, ellos puedan también hacerse atender tener estas facilidades de realizarse las pruebas y poder tener también la tranquilidad de seguir con sus actividades, con su familia, con su núcleo familiar. En el tema de transporte, de la misma manera, no solamente tenemos personas en movilidad humana que han venido con otros idiomas, sino también personas con discapacidad, donde el transporte y todos los servicios deben ser inclusivos para las personas, tanto en idiomas como también en personas con discapacidad visual, discapacidad auditiva, etcétera. Hemos trabajado muchísimo en ello para poder darles estas facilidades tanto a las personas nativas, a las personas quiteñas, ecuatorianas, como a las personas en movilidad humana, teniendo una principal preocupación por ellos, ya que este no es su país. Hay mucha gente que se pierde al momento de querer acceder o querer ir a ver su visa, por ejemplo, y no han podido llegar a su destino. Nosotros tenemos la obligación acá, junto a la Policía Metropolitana y al Cuerpo de Agentes de Control, de trabajar de la mano para poder dar estas facilidades y que puedan llegar a sus destinos y realizar sus trámites con toda la seguridad y con toda y haciendo un seguimiento, ¿no? Nosotros en la Secretaría de Inclusión estamos abiertos permanentemente para poder darles toda la guía que necesiten. Hemos recibido a grupos de refugiados, a grupos de migrantes que han tenido bastantes preocupaciones y nosotros justamente los hemos guiado para que puedan ir a las embajadas, para que puedan acceder a los trabajos, cuál es la metodología para sacar sus documentos dentro de la ciudad y darles esas facilidades. Agradecemos enormemente a ACNUR y Hayas que nos ha dado la mano para poder trabajar con ellos también y darles garantía de protección de los derechos. Acá en la ciudad tenemos una gran cantidad de personas de inmigración y hemos trabajado en una campaña que se llama Quito con Conciencia, donde toda la ciudadanía se ha comprometido en dar una mano, en trabajar por la gente, en darles un seguimiento, en darles un apoyo, incluso cuando las personas no han tenido recursos para poder acceder a ciertos servicios, las personas incluso han tenido, la ciudadanía ha hecho bancos comunes para poder recaudar fondos, para poder pagar estas necesidades tan importantes. Entonces sabemos que el tema se ha venido trabajando, las campañas educomunicacionales son muy importantes para poder hacer de esta una ciudad inclusiva. Otra de las cosas que es muy importante es la preparación que se les da. Nosotros contamos con colegios y escuelas municipales donde han ingresado niños para no perder sus estudios que han venido de cada uno de sus países realizando, para que no pierdan que puedan seguir estudiando, han seguido sus estudios, se han podido ingresar a estas escuelas y colegios sin mayor complicación y ellos puedan tener un espacio tranquilo. Dentro de las escuelas también se ha trabajado arduamente en las campañas de xenofobia de sus propios compañeros y hemos tenido grandes resultados. Otra cosa que es muy importante también es recalcar que hemos trabajado en temas de convivencia y de desigualdad en el Distrito Metropolitano de Quito, fomentando un trato amable a los ciudadanos participantes en este experimento social, si se lo puede llamar. Y hemos trabajado actividad
Thank you. So we're having some technical problems with Ms. Quiroga, and while we solve that, we might want to go to Ms. Armede from Sao Paulo. We heard before from her great examples of the mayor and the city increasing access to services for migrants, refugees, and I would be curious to ask about what gaps still remain, what challenges do you still face from scaling this kind of projects from the neighborhood level to a greater scale, because we see local authorities really doing great work when it comes to smaller scale, but when it comes to scaling, then that's more challenging, and that's where other partners are needed.
Ok, vamos lá. Vamos lá, Vitória. Eu acho que no âmbito da cidade de São Paulo, a gente é uma cidade com 12 milhões de habitantes. Desafios sociais a gente tem sempre, sempre terá, né? Mas eu penso também, por outro lado, que todo desafio é uma oportunidade. Essa visão é uma visão também muito, muito clara, muito colocada no trabalho que o prefeito Bruno Covas, no trabalho que a secretária Cláudia Carleto desenvolvem. Uma das iniciativas, sem dúvida nenhuma, que permitiram, aí, pensando em desafios e do que a gente pode reforçar dentro desses desafios, como uma política pública um pouco mais assegurada, é entender que no âmbito da cidade de São Paulo, primeiro, a gente tem uma legislação, a gente tem leis, a gente tem normas que regulam os direitos e a articulação de políticas públicas para migrantes. Como eu comentei antes, o plano, sem dúvida nenhuma, ele é uma normativa, uma orientadora, mas a gente, junto com ele, tem uma política pública com uma série de informações daquilo que, primeiro, anualmente, né, no orçamento da nossa cidade, entra como um elemento na agenda de importância da política pública desse grupo social na nossa cidade. Segundo, estando isso também numa lei, isto entra na programação de ações transversais em todas as secretarias. E terceiro, eu acho que pensando em desafios e pensando nas oportunidades que a gente tem, não deixar de reconhecer que uma política pública, historicamente, no campo, pelo menos, da política de imigração e refúgio em São Paulo e no Brasil, se a gente for pensar de uma maneira maior, amplificada, a gente tem uma rede muito forte de representantes da sociedade civil, que antes mesmo da gente ter construído essa política municipal, já estavam aqui. A gente tem aí na cidade de São Paulo, uma cidade que construiu aí nos últimos 70 anos, pela migração, né? São Paulo é uma cidade de migrantes. Sejam os nossos colegas migrantes que vêm de fora do Brasil, sejam os imigrantes internos no Brasil. A São Paulo é construída, a base da nossa cidade é esse pluralismo de gente. A miscigenação é a nossa etnia. A gente tem essa identidade que é muito diversa. E aí, portanto, a gente tem uma rede muito forte de sociedade civil. O que essa rede produziu junto com o poder público, se a gente for olhar esses desafios, por exemplo, a gente teve um programa que envolveu sustentabilidade para a produção de máscaras. Então, a gente teve a união de uma série de atores, o Acnur, né, um dos representantes do Ministério Público do Trabalho, que é um representante do sistema de justiça que garante direitos sociais, estava conectado a essa iniciativa. A gente teve a iniciativa junto da Universidade Estadual de Campinas. Campinas é uma cidade, a terceira maior cidade do estado de São Paulo, fica mais ou menos a uns 100 quilômetros de São Paulo, e tem uma das universidades mais inovadoras, que é a Universidade de Campinas, é uma universidade estadual, e então, juntos a essa rede, a gente teve, por exemplo, a produção de uma série de máscaras feitas pelos migrantes, envolvendo migrantes e outros grupos sociais, e a gente conseguiu com isso, por exemplo, gerar renda e gerar, portanto, também uma proteção com relação à pandemia. Um outro programa que a gente também teve, que foi transversal, foi muito interessante, que é o programa Ligue os Pontos. É um programa desenvolvido por uma outra secretaria. A gente não está falando da Secretaria de Direitos Humanos, da Secretaria de Desenvolvimento Urbano, e que fortalece algo que é fundamental durante a pandemia para a produção de renda e segurança alimentar, mas também até mesmo fora dela, que é a agricultura familiar local. São Paulo é uma cidade que, em volta dela, tem um cinturão verde. A gente, muitas vezes, até o próprio paulistano não conhece, mas a gente tem um cinturão verde em volta da cidade de pequenos produtores. Então, a gente conseguiu, com articulações do poder público e da sociedade civil, ter inovações nesse âmbito de fazer com que a política pública se concretize. Eu pego um desafio e transformo ele numa ação que ajuda as pessoas. Uma outra questão, né, que eu acho que é importante destacar, eu já tinha conversado ali na primeira pergunta que a gente se colocou, mas eu trago aqui para lembrar e para explicar, é também a criação do programa Cidade Solidária, uma articulação que envolve, basicamente, a iniciativa de receber todo tipo de material, envolvendo pessoas físicas, indivíduos ou até mesmo empresas. Assim, a doação foi de produtos de higiene de casa, higiene pessoal, até mesmo, acreditem, alimentação para cães. Né? Então a gente teve todo tipo de produto doado, esses produtos são organizados, parcerias são feitas, são criadas cestas básicas e a gente, só para falar de imigrantes na cidade de São Paulo, a gente tem uma conta de mais de 10 mil cestas básicas entregues nesse programa. Então, quando, assim, para finalizar, quando a gente diz aqui em São Paulo que a gente teve um desafio e está tendo um desafio que envolve superar essa pandemia, a gente também teve um reforço, um suporte mesmo daquilo que eu acredito que a gente faz bem. Eu acho que a gente faz com esforço, a gente acredita que é a construção de uma rede, que não é trabalhar sozinho, que é compreender que antes de mim, outras pessoas já estavam aqui. Durante o nosso trabalho, muitas pessoas também desenvolvem trabalhos e eu tenho certeza que essa compreensão histórica desse momento vai fortalecer e levar para frente as possibilidades para a gente superar dessa pandemia, e a gente sabe que outros desafios vão se colocar, a gente possa manter minimamente uma esperança, minimamente uma memória, né, de que junto a gente consegue fazer mudança, né? Não é uma coisa impossível, ao contrário. Acho que esses exemplos que eu trouxe dão clareza de que é muito possível a gente garantir superação de problemas com soluções muito práticas.
Thank you so much for your intervention. I think what you're describing is one of the secrets of the Global Compact, which is the whole of society approach. And then the whole of government approach is the other side of the coin. But definitely cities are doing great work, but they cannot do it alone. Now, I want to move to Councillor Dubois and the context of Canada before we move to Q&A. And I want to ask a similar question, Councillor. You just described a really long list of very exciting programs, but what challenges do you see? What gaps still exist, and how can the international community help fill those gaps at this moment in time?
I think one thing the COVID-19 hit for all municipal governments, as you, Victoria, earlier mentioned in your remarks, is the revenue lost. Because in Canada, every local government has to balance the budget, and we can go beyond on the dollar figure we have. I think I will go back to what I earlier said in terms of the community. I want to share a story that there was a local author in my community who sponsored a family, and in March, when the COVID-19 hit, the local author with their partner, they were traveling, they came back, then the 14 days in isolation, and they had to be isolated, but their fridge was empty, and someone knocks at their door and they hear this familiar voice. But as they were a family that they sponsored, brought a lot of groceries and food and things like that to the sponsor, who now isolated in their own houses for 14 days to support. When I see that, what it speaks to me, and as someone who's a local leader, who also was a former refugee, and I was refugee for 20 years before Canada offered me safe haven, and I actually became Canadian citizen in 2017, and I ran office for 2018 then got elected my first time I ever ran for an office. So for me, having that experience, I really understand the stress my community has, my constituents, the unknown, the uncertainty, and what the future holds. We don't know now. Even the COVID-19 doesn't have a season. We don't know if the numbers will increase. But here, the numbers we maintain at this province, and I'm at the capital city. We on the island, we're doing good in terms of not having high numbers. But now more than ever, this virus has shown us that we really depend on each other. You know, whether we Black, white, Latino, Asian, an indigenous person, native, newcomer, this is the time that we really pull together to really say that we in this together for all of us. Our health depends on the health of the next to us and the person next to them, ensuring that others can access care and we look after each other. So because of that, communities that are dealing with the COVID-19 and the spread of the coronavirus, people really look to the local governments, you know, and any local government will agree with me this, because the local government is where everyday things happen. So it's up to us that what type of efficient and bold response do we have to really protect the safety of all residents as well as the public health. And we also have an unhoused issues in my community. So the biggest challenge is the revenue lost. And for when particularly it comes to refugees, as I earlier mentioned, we will have a welcome city strategy where we invited the library, public library, you know, the Chinese community center, seniors, settlement agencies, youth, and community at large to come together, a task force, then help us what the city could do in terms of civic education, in terms of employment, in terms of inclusion, sense of belonging, and how could we do that, because they could help us in that terms. And in our community, we've seen a little bit of rise of anti-Asian and anti-Asian sentiment. And fortunately, the provincial government has a resilience, a BC resilience program, and the hub is actually in Victoria, where it will help and bring communities to look at anything, how to initiate and to prevent hate crimes and things like that. So at a city level, when in next week, in August 6th, we'll be debating on which programs will go forward. Would it be the social planner, and tenant ambassador, and such important, because in my community, 61% are tenants, and refugees don't own homes most of the times. So having a program is not only respond to the public at large, but also benefit the refugees. So it will be big challenging, and we will have a difficult conversations. At the end of the day, we have a small pool of money. So for me, will be what type of programs could we put forward that really helps the most vulnerable, but also in that helps also refugees, the seniors, and single mothers, and other people who might otherwise need. But federal government came in. We have a Canadian COVID-19 relief funding, and the provincial had a tenant assistance program. So a lot has been happening, and that's where the city and other organizations were helping to support the communities to understand that. But I think the one thing that makes me proud is how neighbors were helping other neighbors. There was mutual Facebook groups. People will write a post, I need a ride. I ran out of something with somebody because a lot of cities were isolated, including refugees, right? So neighbors were helping each other. Like the Victoria Mutual Facebook was more than 50, I think 20,000 people signed in a short time. And people were either staying anonymous and asking help, and somewhere else in the city was offering that help. I think that government can do that. Only the neighbors and the public can do that. And that is something as a local leader makes me proud. But moving forward, we will have a tough discussion because at the end of the day, we have to make difficult decisions.
Thank you, Councillor. And I see three teams here. First, the fact that the main challenge now is really finances, and we actually got a lot of questions around that from the audience today. Cities are now faced with very difficult cuts, and so when you think about trade-offs, what programs help more than one population at once, and what are the overlapping needs so that you don't create competition over scarce resources? Then the second theme is national government support is actually very important because, and it's important national governments have local governments feed into their relief plans. And that's actually something that the Secretary General calls on in the brief that Gillian mentioned before. And yeah, like this idea of neighbors helping neighbors in the resilience world, we always say that social cohesion is much more important than emergency toolkits, or in this case, face masks, etc. When neighbors take care of each other, they're solving half of the problem. So let's just, now we have about 15 minutes for Q&A. And while we collect a few questions, I would love to invite Maria Beatriz Nogueira, head of the UNHCR Sao Paulo office, to ask the first question. So the floor is yours, Maria.
Thank you very much, Victoria. It's a pleasure for us to be here, and my question will be directed to Juliana Ahmed, with whom I have the pleasure of working practically on a daily basis here in São Paulo. Juliana, in the beginning of the pandemic, our office and yours, we both launched a protocol on improving and guiding the assistance and counseling of transgender migrants and refugees in the city of São Paulo. This protocol is now being used both by the public service and by local NGOs and UNHCR partners. And it's a very successful experience in cooperation between us. My question would be, how is it for your secretariat, for your work, to work with these different groups, vulnerable groups within the mandate of your secretariat? Women survivors of violence, children, LGBTI population, elderly population, persons with disabilities. How is it to work with these groups? And of course, migrants and refugees, seeing that in several instances, there is an overlapping between these vulnerabilities, how to better deal with them, especially in this COVID context. Thank you.
Mr. Mede, you can answer directly.
Olá. Oi, Dia, tudo bom? Bom, primeiro eu queria fazer um agradecimento formal ao Acnur em São Paulo. A gente conversou a semana passada e reforça aqui a nossa ação solidária. A gente tem um centro de referência e atendimento a migrantes e a gente vai estar recebendo daqui a pouquinho um apoio para fortalecer as ações, infraestrutura, material. A gente também tem ações que o Acnur vai estar reforçando no município no âmbito da assistência social para abrigamento. Então eu só queria aproveitar que a Bia está aqui, aproveitar que todos estão aqui, porque gratidão e solidariedade é algo que nesse momento de pandemia e para a vida a gente tem que manter como uma prática permanente, né? Então, nosso muito obrigada, prefeito Bruno Covas, a secretária Cláudia, agradecimento. Falando agora da tua pergunta, né? Respondendo a tua pergunta. De fato, a gente teve aí um diálogo que começou em especial porque a gente tem em São Paulo, a gente tem aqui no Brasil também, em janeiro, uma data que é uma data que fala da visibilidade trans, ou seja, da importância de se compreender, de se entender, de se criar políticas públicas e de se desenvolver o respeito ao gênero e à identidade de gênero e também a orientação sexual. Isso não se difere em nacionalidade. A gente compreende e a gente identificou no nosso diálogo a importância de se levar esse protocolo à frente. Então, foi criado um diálogo do Acnur com a nossa coordenação de política para a população LGBTQI+, pensando também numa realidade que envolve uma realidade muito complicada sob o ponto de vista da proteção social, muito complicada sobre o ponto de vista da condição de saúde, que também são as profissionais trabalhadoras do sexo. Então, assim, esse diálogo, né, essa realidade que é desafiadora, de um trabalho que precisa ser reconhecido e precisa ser protegido nas suas vulnerabilidades, acho que foi um pouco desse esforço de se desenvolver esse protocolo. Aqui, pensando na secretaria, o que eu acho, né? Aí eu vou falar um pouco do meu ponto de vista individual, mas eu tenho certeza que ele também reflete muito o que a gente entende aqui em São Paulo, na cidade, na política pública, como um referencial. Pluralismo político é um princípio que está na nossa Constituição Federal desde 1988. A gente teve 20 anos de ditadura militar no Brasil. E aí, portanto, quando isso aparece pós um período longo de ausência de direitos, a gente não pode deixar essa expressão passar em branco, né? Não dá para a gente achar que ela não tem destaque numa redação, num papel, e achar que ela é menor. O pluralismo é exatamente a nossa necessidade, a nossa capacidade, a melhor característica que a gente tem para dizer que quanto mais diverso, quanto mais diferentes as opiniões, quanto mais diferentes os pontos de vista, a gente pode construir algo melhor, porque, como eu disse, São Paulo tem 12 milhões de habitantes. Eu não consigo compreender que a gente é uma coisa uníssona. O ser humano não jamais será algo que é padronizado. Então, a importância de você ter políticas públicas de direitos humanos em várias frentes e que se conversam é, sem dúvida nenhuma, na minha opinião, a melhor forma de você desenvolver garantia de direito. Então, eu dei o exemplo desse protocolo falando de uma coordenação de imigração, falando de um órgão que é externo ao poder público, mas que faz uma política mundial pública, que é o Acnur, e a gente teve a coordenação de políticas LGBTQI+, trabalhando em rede. A gente tem também uma questão a ser identificada, e me perdoa se eu falo o nome errado, do nosso representante do Canadá, Schmark, né? Quando ele me perdoe se falo o seu nome errado, me desculpe. Mas me chama a atenção, né, quando ele vem e diz eu li sobre a experiência da vida dele, digo que parabéns, eu acho que é um lugar, você ocupa um lugar importante, que é o lugar exatamente da representatividade, da inclusão das agendas de direitos humanos para refugiados nas políticas públicas, assim, parabéns. Desenvolva sempre o seu trabalho. Quando ele trouxe para a gente e falou assim, olha, o migrante, né, o refugiado, ele traz consigo toda a sua experiência, né, ele traz consigo sua história, eu não tenho dúvida nenhuma que ele traz também uma série de experiências que vão se confrontar com as nossas realidades sociais no Brasil. Então, quando a gente fala da necessidade de ter um pluralismo de políticas de direitos humanos que dialoguem com a questão da garantia de direitos de refugiados, por vezes, infelizmente, é a gente reconhecer que a gente vai ter uma discriminação de gênero, a gente vai ter uma discriminação de identidade de gênero, a gente vai, né, o refugiado vai chegar no Brasil e vai encontrar o racismo, que se transforma, às vezes, de uma maneira ampliada, porque soma a xenofobia com o racismo. Então, eu já vi isso acontecer no nosso território no Brasil. Infelizmente, às vezes um migrante negro sofre duplamente, porque é um homem ou uma mulher negra e ele é um imigrante, é um refugiado. Então, é uma dupla violação de direito. Às vezes, esse imigrante encontra, na realidade, onde a gente está vivendo coletivamente, questões de violação de direito básico, que é o direito ao acesso ao documento, a uma identidade. Poder ter documentos na mão, poder ter a sua identidade reconhecida como cidadão, é um primeiro, assim, dos mais tradicionais direitos humanos, das convenções de direitos civis e políticos, é uma das primeiras garantias de direito, e às vezes a gente tem esse desafio. Então, sem dúvida nenhuma, Beatriz, quando a gente pensa, né, e se encontra aqui na Secretaria, você já fez reunião conosco e acompanha nosso trabalho, na presença de uma série de pessoas que às vezes não estão falando de mulheres imigrantes, mas estão falando de mulheres, a gente traz a percepção da importância de política pública transversal, plural, e ainda que não específica para o migrante, porque talvez a gente tenha que também pensar essa medida, né? Que é a medida da inclusão. Até que ponto aquilo que é exclusivo garante uma adesão comum e uma adesão de direitos. Então, às vezes a gente tem que pensar que uma política que é universal, que a gente está buscando falar para todas as mulheres, sem dúvida nenhuma, abarca também a mulher migrante e refugiada. E assim vai para qualquer outra política, como, por exemplo, a de garantia de direitos de trabalho decente. Então, finalizando a minha resposta, eu só posso reafirmar para você que a garantia de direito na política pública, aqui em São Paulo, tendo uma multiplicidade de frentes, é a forma que a gente encontrou e que a gente não vai desistir, vai levar para frente, de conduzir uma política pública mais integral para as pessoas, inclusive para os refugiados.
Thank you. Thank you, Juliana. Thank you so much. We are wrapping up, so I would like to ask one last question to the representatives from Quito, Gabriela, and the representative from Victoria. Just to close, we received a question from the floor which asks, has COVID changed the relationship between local government and national government on the issue of migration in your countries? So you have 1 minute to close, and then we will wrap up. I will have the task of stop you when we're over time, so please don't let me do that. So I would love to invite Gabriela first, if you're online.
Listo. Sí, mil disculpas, tuve una falla técnica con mi internet. Bueno, nosotros acá en Quito hemos venido trabajando de la mano con el gobierno central, tanto nosotros como gobierno local con gobierno central, para poder articular acciones en todas las instancias que necesitan apoyo a las personas en movilidad humana, tanto en salud, tanto en educación, tanto en temas alimenticios. Hemos trabajado también con el Consejo Provincial de Pichincha en la emergencia para poder llegar a las personas más vulnerables con kits de alimentación. Hemos estado permanentemente logrando cohesionarnos para poder lograr resultados eficientes, trabajar en políticas públicas que sean aplicables a corto plazo. Y ahora algo que me parece muy importante mencionarlo es que hoy es el día de la lucha contra la trata, y nosotros hemos trabajado, desgraciadamente existe este mal a nivel mundial todavía que debe cortárselo de raíz porque no debería existir. Nosotros trabajamos junto a Fiscalía para precautelar los derechos de niñas que han sido vulneradas en esto, y queremos hacer, como mencionaba, énfasis para que la trata se termine. Es importante trabajarlo y sobre todo concientizar y concienciar a la gente para que esto no quede impune. Hemos trabajado de la mano con Fiscalía, con Gobierno Central. Tenemos una casa para víctimas que fueron víctimas de trata con fines de explotación sexual, y estamos trabajando para que estas niñas vuelvan a ser insertadas a la sociedad de la manera adecuada y que ellas sean un testimonio vivo de que esto no debe existir y que debe ser erradicado de raíz. Seguimos trabajando de la mano y nuevamente agradecer a ustedes por la invitación y por todo el apoyo.
Thank you so much, and I couldn't agree more. And it's good to see this collaboration that is from one level of government to the next. Councillor, just to close us off, how has the relationship with the national government evolved in this time?
Yeah, thank you. And first, I want to give shout out and thankful to the UNHCR Canada, because UNHCR Canada built a lot of relationship with the federal government, and they work closely with the federal government when it comes to the protection of refugees in Canada. So I really appreciate the staff and the team, that all the work they do. But in terms, and they have been engaging with local cities with refugee solidarity initiative, cities with refugees. But at a local level, I hope that the federal government really have a stimulus program for us, so that we will have more money to do more things. But we will see. But one last thing I want to say, local. The federal government really funded a program which is a national program, and they extended to many communities. It's called Local Immigration Partnership, which is very unique in Canada, and that is a way to create cohesive social cohesiveness, and also to really bring many actors to work in terms of bringing everyone and building inclusive and welcoming communities. And to see that the federal government fund that and increase to more extended communities, that is promising.
That's good, and in our platform, we will definitely make sure to share a lot of these examples that we saw today, not only from the local level, but also from the national level, because we need to set the bar high there. To wrap up, I'd like to turn back to Gillian for any closing reflection. Gillian, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much to all of you. It's been a most inspiring and substantive discussion. So, and absolutely wonderful to hear from people who are, in a sense, on the ground and engaged in developing these programs. And your passion, your spirit, your absolute determination really do help us at UNHCR, because, as many have said today, nobody can do this on their own. We can't do this alone. We must work together. And I think today's discussion has really demonstrated that. I wanted to make just a few points, if I may. Some of them you really all made and very well. But the critical one, we believe, is inclusion. And I say this for a very particular reason, and that is that to find resettlement places for the most in need of protection internationally is extremely difficult. We've got declining numbers. We're finding it very, very hard to find countries willing to take resettlement. It's also in the political environment that we're in, a very difficult environment to achieve returns to countries of origin. As we all know, refugees for the most part want to return to their own homes, their own cultural environments, but they are really unable to do so. And that is why it's leading UNHCR to take such a strong policy development in persuading higher levels of inclusion. And COVID-19 has really demonstrated that policy most particularly. Because those suffering from the impacts of COVID, either directly with the virus itself or the social and economic impacts, which are likely to last for a very long time, we see the real solution, and UNHCR is about finding solutions. The real solution lies with inclusion in the communities in which refugees and asylum seekers find themselves. So that's meant, of course, in the context of COVID health, but also education. We need to ensure that vulnerable people and their children have access to education. We have very tiny numbers of refugees that ever get to tertiary education, and that's one of our objectives, to try to increase those numbers so that we don't have whole lost generations of young people who don't have education. But you've all given wonderful examples of inclusion, and I find them very stimulating. I wanted very briefly to mention community sponsorship. It is a very important way, along with inclusion, of bringing local communities to work with local government to take on responsibility for refugees. It's a wonderful way forward, we believe, and can produce very significant numbers of a regular pathway that is acceptable to the community, because the community embraces refugees and then can pass that message on to federal governments. And that brings me to the point about xenophobia, rising racism, and most of you have mentioned this. I think that when we have communities, local governments engaged with refugees, they can stop the populist rise of xenophobia, and they can send that message to federal politicians or politicians at central governments. And in other words, it's a self-informing process that we can defeat xenophobia at the local level, where it's actually going to be most dangerous and most powerful. And with that comes, I think, perhaps the last point that I'd like to make, and that is the importance of leadership. I know that very well from my own professional experience, that we must have leadership. If we have that leadership from mayors, from people in the local community, then it's possible to have a welcome to refugees, but also to stem any movement towards xenophobia. Can I finish by saying, or by drawing attention, in fact, to an article that we've just produced here at UNHCR on cities and municipalities and their responses to COVID, that's on our website. And please do check it under the and to explore some of the pledges that have been made by local government and community groups, but also again to thank the 250 cities that have signed UNHCR's Cities Stand with Refugees solidarity statement with the Mayor's Migration Council and other city network partners. So thank you all for what I think, for me at least, has been a very stimulating session, and thank you for such an active engagement of our audience and our representatives of cities. Thank you, Vittoria.
Thank you, Gillian. Just to close, Ms. Hangara, to just close up on where you can find the recording of this video and additional resources.
Yes, thank you, Vittoria. I would just like to agree. It's been an excellent event, very valuable exchange, and I do hope that participants will take up the call to continue to share good practices and keep the discussions rolling. As for the recording of the event for sharing in the future, this will be available in both video and audio only podcast format, and you'll see it on the event page in the coming days. You will receive a follow-up email about that once it's been posted. So with that, I think we'll be wrapping up. Thank you once again to our partners at UNHCR. It's really been a pleasure working with you once again. We look forward to the next events, and thank you last but not least to all of the participants for your active participation in this interesting discussion. Thank you. Bye-bye.